Oftentimes when we discuss new upcoming monster taming games, we're generally looking at either games that are coming out this year or games that don't have specific release dates. Now, that being said, as a content creator and an enjoyer of monster taming games, I'm always looking at the near future, and as of such today, we're going to be talking about some upcoming monster taming games that are slated for release in 2024. Now, do note that there are a plethora of games that are supposedly releasing this year. However, I am pretty skeptical of some of them, so I do expect over the next few months this list to grow exponentially. But regardless, let's see what next year has to offer so far. Alright, so granted a lot of these games don't have release dates, however we do know that Pow World is slated for release in early access sometime in January, which if you haven't heard of by now is a survival action combat monster taming game with a clear inspiration taken from games like Ark, Rust, and the development studio's previous iteration, Craftopia. The game itself also features monsters with guns, which is pretty dope. I've been covering the game a ton lately on my channel since they've been putting out a lot of content in terms of trailers and whatnot, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much here, but if you want to learn more about the game, definitely check out any of my Pow World videos. I'll leave a playlist link below. Another title that's supposed to be releasing next year, at least according to its Kickstarter campaign, is Mithrin, a Monster Rancher-inspired raising life sim with real-time Naruto Ninja Storm-esque combat. Lately, significant updates have been pretty sparse, with the development team spending a lot of time focusing on the PvP aspect of the game. However, from what I understand, there will be various areas for you to explore, evil creatures to defeat, Mithrin to bond with, whom are as sapient as something like a Digimon, so each will have their own unique personalities, quirks, and more. Now, as you guys already know, I'm more of a monster taming RPG kind of guy, so I will be keeping this on my radar. However, I think it's really going to find its niche with fans of games like Monster Rancher. Recently on the channel, we did a showcase of a game called Dragon Spirits, which was an active time battle monster taming RPG that was developed in RPG Maker. Now, despite this, the game itself was actually pretty cool, and while it did have its, at times, laughable translation issues, it was still pretty well put together. If you didn't already know, it revolves around you taming and battling spirits, typically of dragons, in a world of your own creation or something like that. The story's kind of weird if I'm being honest, but anyways, the game does have a sequel in the works called Dragon Spirits 2, which has been created from the ground up utilizing Unity instead, and it does have a demo of its own on Steam. However, it's not yet translated to English, and I'll be darned if I try to navigate a JRPG in a completely different language. Now, that being said, it'll definitely be something to keep an eye on, since the first one did have fun and engaging gameplay and a very nice art style. If you're looking for something a little less combat-oriented and relaxed in nature, but still has combat, look no further than Ova Magica, a monster raising, farming, taming sim that is inspired by Stardew Valley, and as you'd expect, has a much more laid-back tone, where you mostly just do day-to-day stuff like farming, crafting, building relationships, and more. The game also features blobs, which can breed and crossbreed, which is algorithmic in nature, meaning that there are likely an infinite amount of possibilities, or at least in the tens of thousands. If you've played Cassette Beast, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. And it does have its own unique turn-based combat system, which revolves around 3-on-3 battles, so there's that as well. But again, not my typical bread and butter. I'm far too impatient and ADHD-ridden to actually deal with farming, but that's just me. Next up, we have Kindred Fates, which if you've been a longtime fan of this channel, you will know that this is one of the first games I ever actually started covering after I branched off of Pokemon, which, I mean, if you've been around since Pokemon, you're like one of my first 100 subs. But anyway, Kindred Fates is an open world action combat monster taming game that aims to fuse together titles and ideas from games like Pokemon and Zelda to create a unique monster taming experience. The game is going to have split evolution paths, bonding mechanics allowing for different personalities for each of the kinfolk, 158 of these creatures, which can all have their own unique playstyles and be balanced for PvP. The game's supposed to have a turn-based mode and more. It's definitely going to be a monumental task because there's so much going on, so I'm pretty interested to see how it's executed. Next up, if you're a fan of the Soul Hackers games, there is a title out there called Mirrored Soul, which is a more classic take on the franchise, being inspired by the original Soul Hackers. This SMT spin-off inspired title will feature a snarky storyline, different monsters to recruit and utilize in classic Soul Hackers-esque combat, and more. I can't say I'm an expert of the Soul Hackers series. I haven't really played the first one or the new one for that matter, but the game does look pretty interesting and features a really nice SNES inspired art style if you're a fan of that classical look. If these type of Shin Megami Tensei inspired games are your thing, we did do a video going over several of them, which I do think you should check out linked below. Finally, last but not least, and like I said, there's probably going to be a lot more next year than we currently know about, but we have Lumintail, a brand new monster taming game being developed by the same folks who brought us Pokemon Xenoverse, a very popular Pokemon fan game that I'm sure you've heard of at this point. Now, all that being said, Lumintail is going to be its own unique story-driven RPG that features up to 4-on-4 battles, again, a story-focused narrative, a slew of new creatures, and more. They did have a demo out a while back that's currently not available, but I'd say in terms of how different it is from something like Pokemon, you'd have the low end of the scale, which is like Temtem, which is very close, and then the high end of difference, which is like, I guess, Cassette Beast still being an RPG, but very different. It's somewhere in between the two, and I think the game has a lot of attention to detail, but obviously we're gonna have to wait a while since it's coming out at the end of 2024, but I've got a lot of faith in this one. But yeah, there you go, guys. Just a quick video going over 7 monster taming games that are slated for a 2024 release. That being said, these games, in many cases, are a year out, and there is, of course, a lot we don't know about them, hence the less extensive descriptions than you might see in a video going over games that are upcoming in a sooner time frame. That being said, the game's trailers and footage showcased in today's video do speak for themselves, so if there is anything here that you found interesting, definitely check out their social media pages linked below. And if you do want to stay up to date on all things monster taming, definitely subscribe to the channel for daily content. You could also check out my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon linked below if you really want to support the channel. And just wanted to say special thanks to our patrons, especially Jim Hamilton, Dro Ghost, Dark Persona Exodus, and Candy Morency. And we'll see you next time. Peace.